Yo, welcome to episode 11 of Real Talk. Here we are, and we're changing it up a little bit today. Every topic that I've touched on so far has been a topic that relates to either life or business. Now, those are the topics that I think maybe will reach a more broad audience, but at the end of the day, I am a photographer. So I want to dive into a more technical topic today. I want to dive into a more photo-based topic that I enjoy. And the one that we're talking about today is how I feel about having the Canon R5 for about 8 months now. Now, I was skeptical just like you guys were whenever I got this camera. I was happy about it. I was happy when it came out because it looked like the perfect camera. It looked like an absolute beast for photo, video. It really looked like there was nothing that was going to hold it back until they started rolling out, until people started getting their hands on it and realized that there was one big drawback, that the thing overheated. Whenever it came out, I didn't buy it right away because of that. I saw the specs just like you guys did. I saw all of the numbers roll out about it, and the first impression was like, wow, this thing is amazing. I'm getting it. And then I saw the people overheating it. I saw that you couldn't record in 4K 120 without overheating it. I saw that the camera was capable of shooting in 8K, which I knew I would really never use, but whenever it was capable of that, even though it overheated. So really, could you use it for anything? So I was skeptical, and I waited it out a little bit. Just like everything else, they were on back order at first, and they announced it, and then they didn't ship for a couple of months. So while everyone just placed their order right away, I kind of held back. I had the EOS R at the time. Not the best camera in the world, but it was enough. I knew that I wanted to get to a point of only shooting in 4K, but I wasn't really capable of that with the EOS R. That thing only shot 4K 30, and it also had a 1.8 crop whenever you're shooting in 4K. So it's not even, you could say it's not even a real 4K camera. But I needed to make the upgrade. So I believe around February of 2021, I decided to pull the trigger. I decided to actually get it because I knew some friends that were really, really loving the camera. And in the real world application, it was a lot more usable. Sometimes I do interviews. For example, this right here is being filmed on the R5. This is being filmed in 4K 24, and it's in C-Log. This does not overheat the camera. I've never even gotten an overheating warning whenever I'm shooting in 4K 24, which is amazing. I'm not going to shoot these in 8K. I'm not even going to shoot them in the downsampled 8K that ends up being 4K because the quality is there. 4K is a really high quality, especially coming from the 1080 world, coming from having, if I wanted to be full frame, having to shoot it in 1080. It's a lot nicer than that. I don't need to shoot it in 8K. So when I got this camera, I knew I wanted to shoot most of my projects in 4K 60 frames per second. A lot of the time before I got it, I was shooting in 1080 60. If you don't know much about cameras, whenever you shoot in 60 frames per second, it allows you to slow your clips down. The normal video, whenever you export, the normal video that you might see is in 24 frames per second. So just with that being said, if you shoot it in 60 frames per second, you have more than twice the amount of frames than you need to make that final product. So this allows you to slow your clip down by at least half. So having the high resolution of 4K and then the high frame rate of 60, I knew that this is what I was going to use. Now, in the R5, there are 3 different ways that you can shoot in 4K 60. You can shoot in all eye, which says it's for editing. This is going to be the highest bit rate. I'm not sure exactly what the bit rate is, but it's going to allow you to pull the most colors out of it, but the files are massive, and it also takes a tool on the camera more. So I decided to shoot in the middle one. This is called IPB. IPB is just the standard. It's still a high bit rate because it is a nice camera. If I shoot in the lowest quality on my R5, I still think you'll be able to tell that it's a better sensor, a better camera than the phone. I know the phones are getting better, but I do think that the camera's dynamic ranges and just the look of it, I think the lowest spec on my camera will still look better than your iPhone. But whenever I shoot in this IPB 4K 60, I don't have to worry about much. I have a 256 gigabyte CF Express card. I have filled this up once, I believe, and it was whenever I was shooting these really long interviews. But I have not filled up a 256 card in like a real world scenario. A lot of the stuff I shoot is events, maybe weddings, recap videos, stuff like that. So I'm not necessarily filming constantly. I did come close to overheating it once shooting in this setting, and I was really shocked about it, but it all made sense. So I was shooting a wedding, really hot day. I believe it was like 90 degrees outside. And a lot of the wedding day's events were outside. So I was shooting in 4K 60, which is what I knew I needed to get the highest resolution to make the images the best, so that I could color them how I wanted to, and they would just look as nice as I wanted them to. So I was shooting in 4K 60, and I was outside. Sure enough, I get that overheating warning, and it said that I only had 5 minutes left of filming, and then it was going to overheat. But the nice thing about it is whenever you switch the specs, it gives you an updated overheat warning. So for example, whenever I saw that, I was like, oh man, like I still have a lot of filming left for today. I'll go over to 24 frames for a little bit. Or maybe I'll go down to 1080 60 in the highest bitrate, which can still keep up with the 4K 60. Obviously, it's not the same amount of pixels or anything, but I'm not sacrificing a ton if I need to do that. So I switched to 4K 24, and I had unlimited filming from there on out. I ended up going back to 4K 60 once I could actually have my camera off, sit down for a little bit, and take a break from filming. But this was one scenario where I was kind of skeptical about it. I got a little bit nervous because I only had one camera with me. I was lucky enough that day to have somebody there filming with me. My friend Pat was there, filming on another camera. So if mine was to overheat, we did have a fallback, which is nice, but I never want to have to rely on that because at the end of the day, we're there to have two cameras running pretty much at all times. So the third setting that you could shoot in a 4K 60, which I honestly have never shot in, I think it's called IPB low. So this is just the lowest bit rate. It's just small files, but it's nice if you're shooting 4K 60 and like don't want to fill up your card or don't want to take too much of a toll on the camera. You have the ability to do this. But I always shoot in that medium bitrate. I shoot the IPB, and it's really nice. The 8K was a nice feature whenever you saw it. It's one of those things that makes you know that the camera is future-proof, which is something I was looking for. I knew that I was about to spend more money than I ever have on a camera, and I needed those specs to prove to me why I would want to do that. I needed to justify spending this money knowing that I would be using this camera for a while. So whenever I saw it came out and shot 4K 120 frames per second, which if you don't know what that means I can slow it down even more than the 60 frames per second, twice as much actually. So you get that super slow-mo, which is fun in sports. And it also was able to shoot 8K. 8K raw to be exact, which is crazy. Now, yes, it overheats if you're filming for too long. The files are massive, but it's capable of it. There's ways to get around the overheating. There's ways to record onto maybe bigger cards, record onto a monitor, so that if you do need this, you can do it. There's one scenario, well, there's actually two scenarios that I've used it in before. The first one that I used it in was product photography, product video, and I was in the studio and we knew that we wanted to be able to mask out these products and we wanted to be able to animate them. So we got simple things like it was a rosé company, a canned rosé. So we tied a fishing line to the can and spun it around so that we could get this 360 movement. And shooting in 8K gave us a ton of resolution to work with. So we could punch in, punch out, animate that to come in and out of the frame so we could make this edit a really creative edit. But that didn't actually push the camera too much because it was in a studio setting. So I was happy with how it performed. I was really, really encouraged by it. And then another real world scenario that I used it in was whenever I was shooting real estate. If you know me, you know I shoot a lot of real estate. And I was out in Los Angeles and we were shooting this really big house. We were shooting this really, really nice house. And whenever we were shooting it, the person who we were shooting for, I believe it was the homeowner, went to the shot of him standing on the front balcony and the camera to pull out. The balcony was pretty high up. And for the camera to go back after that, I needed to be pretty wide. I needed to be able to reveal the entire front of the house. How did I do this? I couldn't be punched in at 35 or else I'd be walking for a while trying to show the entire house and it wouldn't look that big. It looks big whenever you have that wide perspective, whenever you're at that 16 millimeter showing everything that you possibly can. So I threw the camera in 8K. I put it in 8K 30 so that I had the ability of slowing it down a tad bit if I needed to. And I started at 16 millimeter, pointing up at him. So he talked. I was able to punch in by 2 times. So if it was a 4K timeline, I was able to punch in and see just him in frame. So it's almost simulating like I had a 35 millimeter on. And then as he was done talking, I pulled back, I walked back, showed the entire house. So as I was walking back, I slowly keyframed from that 2 times punched in all the way back. So it was almost like I zoomed in and out. This was just the one real world scenario that the 8K came in handy. I was losing 0 resolution by doing this, and it worked. It totally worked. And I know if you actually are thinking about shooting in 8K, it's probably overkill. It sounds cool. I did it whenever I got the camera. I just wanted to test it out. I was just messing around with it. I never actually used it for anything, but I was just like, dang, I wonder what an 8K clip looks like. I wonder how high resolution it truly is. But 8K is usually used for VFX, which is the scenario with the studio where we could mask out the product and still have the highest resolution possible, or whenever you need to punch in, whenever you might not have a tight enough lens, whenever you need to animate throughout the clip. So there's 2 scenarios where it came in handy, and I just love this camera. It's been really nice for me. It's allowed me to take my content to the next level. It's allowed me to push myself creatively. Shooting in 4K has allowed me to up my prices. It's allowed me to have this higher quality video, this higher quality picture that I am really confident in. I'm not losing any sharpness or anything. That I felt like I was losing with the EOS R. Towards the end of my days with the EOS R, I was noticing the 1080-60 just wasn't that sharp, and it made me mad because I was getting these really, really nice shots, but they just didn't look that crisp. They didn't have that nice tack sharp look. But upgrading to the R5 and then eventually getting what's on the camera now, the 24-70 RF lens, changed the game. Everything looks sharper, everything's higher resolution, everything just looks nicer because it's a newer camera. The photo specs I'll touch on briefly. I don't shoot a lot of photos. The reason I don't shoot a lot of photos is because whenever I started out, the work that came my way really was just video work. I didn't really choose this. I'm not mad at it at all. But the work that I usually do is video work. But with the photo specs, I am not held back one bit. If somebody says they need photos, it's a beast. It shoots 45 megapixel stills way higher resolution than people need. I'm not shooting photos for billboards or anything. Whenever I shoot photos, though, I'm still shooting in that 45 megapixel. It also shoots 20 frames per second stills. This means that in 1 second, it can capture 20 different photos. When you're shooting sports, this is huge. You can capture every moment. If they're going up to catch a ball, you can get it whenever the ball's hitting the hand, also whenever they're squeezing and catching the ball. That's so nice. Before you had to time it up or even, honestly, get lucky a lot of the time. But with these cameras getting better, you don't have to worry about that. You have your settings dialed in. You hold down that shutter, and with these fast memory cards too, you can just be holding down the shutter forever. I know I have the CF Express card, which they're really expensive, which kind of annoyed. I was kind of annoyed with it at first, but it's nice. It has read and write speeds, I believe, of 1700 megabits per second, which is just ridiculous. That's 1.7 gigs per second. If you don't know, that might translate it a little bit more. So that's transferring data that fast. It needs that, though. You need to have them be that fast to shoot an 8K, 4K 120, to be shooting these 45 megapixel photos at 20 frames per second. That's what you need. The camera does get held back if you're shooting onto an SD card, because SD cards are not that fast. So if you're getting the R5, make sure you get one of these CF Express cards. But at the end of the day, I love this camera. I'm happy I got it. It's so worth the investment if you're considering it, and it's the best camera I've ever used. I haven't really gotten into the cinema space with using any of those, but I can confidently say that this is my favorite mirrorless camera on the market. I hope you like this spec heavy video where I can dive into actually how I feel about my gear, but I'm going to do more of these coming up, so let me know what gear you want me to talk about, especially if you know that I have it, and I'd be more than happy to do that. Thanks for watching. Peace out.